Hi everyone, Kevin here from Hearthstone. Today we're going to be addressing an issue on the 8492 Clydesdale. Recently we've received some feedback that the bypass door is binding when the stove is hot. Today we're going to look into why. What we're hearing is, when the stove is cold, the bypass door opens and closes smoothly as it should. When the stove heats up, however, the bypass door binds when you attempt to close it, or in some cases won't close at all. In other words, you can't engage the catalyst. Once the stove cools down, the bypass door closes freely as it should. After some investigating, we've pinpointed the issue and we have a solution. Before we go out and do the repair, I'd quickly like to explain what's going on. To quickly sum it up, it's these clips right here. As the stove heats up, these clips expand and make it very hard for the bypass door to open or close. When the stove cools down and these clips shrink, the door is able to open and close freely again. To access these clips, we're going to have to pull the insert from the fireplace. With the insert pulled, we can replace these clips. We're also going to take a look at the bypass rod linkage. We're going to grease that, reinstall the insert, and put it back into service. To do this job, you'll need a drill, a Sharpie, a Phillips bit, a shallow 7/16 socket, and a ratcheting wrench. We'll start by removing the surround. Grab each side and lift it straight up and off the bracket. The next item to remove is the surround bracket. There are 4 screws holding this in place. Here, you can see me marking where each screw is on the surround bracket. This will make it much easier to reinstall the surround in the correct place. Use a Phillips screwdriver to remove these screws. Be careful not to drop a screw or washer when you remove these. Set the hardware aside. You can now lift off the surround bracket. Okay, now that the surround bracket is off, we can focus on removing the outer shroud. There are 16 screws holding this shroud on. It doesn't matter which screws you remove first, as long as you remove them all. I chose to start on the right side. With the right side complete, I move to the top. All of these screws and washers are the same, so you don't need to worry about separating them. When you get to the left side, you will notice a screw holding the catalyst probe bracket. This one does not get removed. Once all of the screws have been removed, the outer shroud can be pulled off and set aside. We now have access to the bypass linkage. We'll service this before we finish, but I want to start by replacing the clips. Looking through the flue collar, you can see the clips. There is 1 clip on each side of the bypass door. The outer clip is the one we are replacing. Reach in through the flue collar and remove the single bolt that holds the clip. This is done with a 7/16 wrench. Be careful not to drop the clip or bolt as you remove them from the stove. While the clips are out, I will take a measurement to show you the difference. The clip I just removed measures 18.8 millimeters. Notice these clips have 45-degree corners. The replacement clips measure 16.7 millimeters and have rounded corners, so the new clips are roughly 2 millimeters smaller. Prep the clip by inserting the bolt through the hole and placing it into the firebox. It is crucial that the new clip is installed parallel to the adjacent clip. As I tighten the bolt, you can see I am straightening the clip to keep it parallel. Once finger tight, snug the bolt with a 7/16 wrench. Do not over tighten. We can now move to the opposite side and repeat the process. Because we have access to the catalysts, it's a good idea to give them a quick inspection. These can be simply lifted off their holders and pulled out of the stove. Clean as needed and reinstall. Now, back to these clips. Prep the clip by inserting the bolt through it and screwing it into the threaded hole. Once more, making sure the clip is parallel as you tighten it. Use a 7/16 socket and wrench and tighten the bolt. Now that the clips have been changed, we can focus on the bypass rod linkage. We'll use some emery cloth to deburr the linkage arms. Next, we'll apply anti-seize to the pivot point. Just a dab will do. We can now move the rod to test functionality. Repeat the process on the bottom arm, first deburring with emery cloth, and then applying anti-seize. Once again, we can move the bypass rod to test functionality. That wraps up the repair. Now it's time to reassemble. I'll start by setting the shroud in place. Starting a couple of top screws first will hold the shroud so you can install the remaining screws. All I'm doing here is starting the screws. As you work your way around the stove, you'll need to adjust the shroud so all the holes line up. Once they are installed, I will go back and tighten them all. Just like when we remove the shroud, it doesn't matter which screws you start with, just make sure you tighten them all. With the shroud installed, we can move to the surround bracket, once again starting but not tightening all 4 screws. Remember those marks we made earlier? Adjust the bracket so each mark is lined up with the screw head. The screws can now be tightened. The last step is reinstalling the surround. Once again, this just lifts onto the stove and slides into the bracket. This completes the repair. You will now have a smooth operating catalyst bypass door. Reference the Clydesdale owner's manual as needed for reinstallation of the insert. For technical information on this or any of our products, please visit hearthstonetech.com.